Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of the Manifesto. Here on the Manifesto, we look at what the political parties are promising Ghanaians as we prepare for the December election. Today, we are talking about the NPP and their promise in the education sector. The NPP government promised free SHS in 2016 and the party says it has delivered, but it has come with a number of issues. The opposition, NDC, have also raised a number of issues as far as this program is concerned and other promises the party made in the education sector and what Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia will do if he's given opportunity to become president in the education sector. We'll go for a quick break. When we come back, I'll tell you my guest and what we are discussing. Welcome back to the Manifesto. Here we discuss the promises of the various political parties as we prepare for the election. Today, I'm doing the NPP, the Governing New Patriotic Party. The party is promising a number of things within the education sector. It started from somewhere. 2017 September, President Akufo-Addo introduced the free SHS policy. It's become a dominant topic in the last 8 years of this administration. Opposition NDC have also raised a number of issues in respect of this particular program and other programs the NPP had introduced in the education sector. On the Manifesto, we are talking about the education sector of the NPP and what Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia will do if he's given an opportunity to become president and the changes he hopes to bring to the education sector. On today's edition, my guest is Dr. Kwabena Tandoh. He's the Deputy Director General of the Ghana Education Service and a member of the Education Committee of the NPP Manifesto. Doc, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sammy.
Good to see you.
It's a pleasure to see you.
In 2016, it was a major campaign promise of then candidate Akufo-Addo. When he became president in 2017, happened to be in the West African Senior High School in Adenta, where the free SHS policy was launched. 8 years on, how would you, from where you sit, assess the free SHS policy, which has become another topic for discussion as we prepare for the election?
Well, Sammy, thank you very much. And as a teacher, if you're going to ask me to assess, you've given me a lot of range. And I'm going to take my time to try to give you a good understanding. But I think, it is good for us to have some context. And the fact that His Excellency, the President, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and his Vice President, who is now the flag bearer for the New Patriotic Party, they started trumpeting free senior high school, not in 2016, but in the 2008 election.
Okay.
And then they went to 2012 and they carried the same policy. And then in 2016, they again presented that same policy because of the future that they envisioned for Ghana. Now, I think it is also important to understand that during all that period, there was a lot of opposition to the policy. And so any conversations now around the fact that someone else brought it, it's really moot. The reason why it is moot is because former president on his last rally in Trade Fair in 2016 actually stood on stage and said that Ghana must not allow free SHS to happen on the whimsical promises of a desperate politician. Many African countries have done it and they have failed and all those things. So it is clear that he didn't really support the idea of free senior high school. Then comes President Akufo-Addo in 2017. He had promised Ghanaians that he would deliver. And as soon as he appointed his Minister for Education, Dr. Matthew Poku Prempeh, they went straight into looking at how do we make this happen. And as all of Ghanaians have come to witness, we started with the first batch of the free SHS intake in September 2017. Prior to that year, we had done some analysis of transition rate from junior high school into senior high school. And we saw that on an annual basis, a little over 100,000 students were gaining admission because they had passed the BEC, they had gained admission into senior high school, but were not transitioning. So some quick data. In 2013, out of the students who gained admission, some 90,604 students did not take up those admission. That represented about 25.7% of the students. 2014, 113,260 students didn't take up. 2015, 115,363 didn't take up. 2016, 113,300.
Staggering figures.
Yes. So when Dr. Mahmoud Baumia says that over 100,000 children were not taking up admission. This is the data. But in 2017, even the first year that free SHS was introduced, people were a bit worried as to was it going to happen. It immediately dropped to 62,453 that didn't take up admission. And then you fast forward all the way to 2019, and it drops to 27,000. Last year, this year we are still taking in students, but last year we had less than 10,000 students.
Wow.
So at the
from
transition
100,000
to now less than 10,000.
Oh,
so
wow.
we have reduced the students who are not going by about 90% with free SHS. Now your question as to how free SHS is doing can be answered in 4 ways, because free SHS came to address 4 key things: access, quality, equity, and relevance.
Okay.
So on the score of access, as I just presented to you, more students are going to school. And just like your data even shows, in 2016-2017 academic year, this number of 813,448 represents the number of students who were in public second cycle institutions, SHS, SHTS, and technical institutes and everything. We had 813,000 from Form 1 to Form 3 in public schools. Now, fast forward to the 2023-2024 academic year. And what we have is we have that same 3-year group. We have now 1.48 million students in school at the same time. So that's an increase of about 83%, of access. So on the score of access, free SHS has definitely opened up the space for more people to take up education beyond the junior high school. Now, on the score of equity, if you look at the data, it shows that in 2016-2017 academic year, if you took any 100 students in our senior high schools, about 35 or 37% were girls. And so a little over about 65% or so were boys. So we had an issue where more boys were transitioning from junior high school into senior high school, and girls were not going. Of course, there are a number of reasons for it. Sometimes when families are faced with financial challenges, they'll choose their boy child to go to school. So we got a situation where more of the boys were taking up admission. Today, this final WASI students who just completed, out of all of the students, some 53.77% were girls. Okay. So on the score of access and equity, we have seen that free SHS has allowed more girls equitable to the proportion of Ghanaians going to school. Not just that, but on the second score of equity, when we came in, we had public, what was called catchment area equity. So you take the category A schools, and most of them are along the coast and the southern part of the country. Yeah. So you have the Wesley girls and the Adisadels and co. And what we saw in those schools was that there was a proportion of every year's admission that was reserved for catchment area. So the people who are from Cape Coast, the people who are from the Accra area to go to Achimotas and co. What would usually happen is that catchment area equity was not going to children from that area, but rather from wealthy people whose children didn't do well in basic schools would take up.
The protocol.
So what we decided to do with that same equity was to keep it and say, listen, these schools are Ghanaian schools. So the catchment area equity became public school equity. So if you went to a public DA, MA, LA, any of the A's, what we usually would term CITO, then what we were saying is that if you performed, we will reserve those spaces for you. As at now, if you go to our category A schools, close to 51% of the students are coming from LAs and MAs and DAs and co. Great. So on the score of equity, we have done well. Now on the score of quality, when free SHS came, there was this major concern that quality was going to be...
And it's still a concern for a lot of people.
But I think it is because we are not examining the data.
Well.
So if you examine the data, and the data speaks, so if you examine the data, it is clear. There is still work to do, but the data is clearly showing that even with the introduction of free SHS, increase in enrollment and everything, quality has not suffered. As a matter of fact, quality has increased. Okay. And the data that is evident to that is that from 2014, 2013, all the way through to 2019, all the students who graduated were not free SHS students. And if you look at their core subject areas, for 2014, about 3 out of the 4 core subject areas, students scored below 50%, sometimes as low as 22% and such. And it was consistently students scoring below 50% on the 4 core subject areas until the first batch of free SHS students came in. The lowest in 2020 was about 51% in the 4 core subject areas. So on the score of quality, they started performing. Now, one of the key things to actually get your viewers to appreciate is that the first cohort of free SHS students wrote their WASI in 2020. In that 2020, if we all remember, because of COVID, schools were closed for close to 4 or 5 months. And then His Excellency the President reopened schools. All these students came into school. We used a strategy to catch them up on what they had lost, as well as using digital learning when they were home. And then we presented them for the WASI, along with all the other West African countries. 2.1 million students in West Africa sat for this first, with our free SHS students, a total of 2.1 million. Out of the 2.1 million, in all of West Africa, the students who got A1 in all 8 of their subjects, the 4 core subjects plus their 4 electives, all of West Africa, we had 465 students spread out across West Africa who got 8 A1s. 411 were Ghanaian students, free SHS students. So the question that quality is being impacted is really more of people just throwing information out there without really understanding. But if we have more time, I can tell you why quality is improving. It's because of the additional interventions to free SHS.
What are these interventions, though?
So quickly, number one, we are training our teachers a lot more. We are giving them targeted training. So we now have what is called the math and science training. So we pull out the math and science teachers and we provide them training on difficult to teach topic areas. And so that they become more comfortable and they are more comfortable in supporting their students. We provide training to all our core subject department heads and teachers on how students performed previously in the WASI, what the challenges were, and we use the WAEC chief examiners to provide these workshops. And so teachers now understand where the gaps are and they're able to support students to improve. Number 3, all 4 core subject areas, regardless of your financial background, students receive textbooks in those areas. And so for that matter, yourself and myself, if we go to school, I happen to be a privileged child and you may not, at least your 4 core subject areas, I have books, but because the government is supplying them, you also have books. Rather than your parents are unable to buy for you, you are borrowing from your friends. So you have the learning materials. Even the elective subject areas, government gives a complement to the school libraries. And so students whose parents are unable to buy it are able to go to the library, collect that. And so that is contributing. Then, number 2, one of the key things that is also happening now, if you remember, when we were going to school, the people with wealthy parents or parents who had a little bit of financial resource will call a teacher and say, my son is not doing well. So provide some extra classes, give you some nokofio, and out of that nokofio, teachers will pull those students, there will be extra classes, and the rest of us who didn't have it will be walking around. Government realized that that is negatively impacting students with from financial backgrounds that are not as solid, less privileged homes. And so what government decided to do was to call the teacher unions and say, listen, we want these extra classes for every student. And so government is going to pay for every student what is called academic intervention grants, so that you can extend your day by about an hour and a half, and in essence, provide extra classes for every student. So these are some of the key interventions that we put in place.
So it was no more for only the privileged,
but every child.
Now for every child.
Every child. Government was paying teachers to extend the day so that they can support every child.
So if you are supposed to close at, let's say, 2 p.m.
now they close at
extra
3.
time, 3 p.m.
Yes, if they close at 3, now they are closing at 4. So, and government saw that that was going to lift the performance of all students. Then the last one, which is not really necessarily a direct intervention, but if you remember when we were in school, midterm, final exam, Beza will come with his big foolscap sheet. It's under his arm. And he will come and list the names of all the students who have not paid. People will be running
Get out of the examination hall.
And for that matter, free SHS now has ensured that children have peace of mind in the classroom. Nobody is going to chase you. Whether your mother has money or not, nobody is going to chase you out of class. Even if you didn't bring chop box with a lot of milk and everything, you at least know that something will enter your mouth, breakfast, lunch, dinner. You sit in the classroom and nobody will chase you. That peace of mind is translating to students' ability to focus on their learning. So there is a lot of impact. Then the last one that we will talk about is relevance. So on the score of relevance, we realized that, listen, we are doing grammar education, but we needed to really also solidify technical vocational education and training. So whenever we talk about free SHS, it is also about free technical vocational education and training.
The concentration is always on the grammar schools.
Yes, but one of the key things we did is that we lifted or realigned technical and vocational education, to ensure that all of the focus on education is also on relevant training and skills and things like that. And we upgraded a lot of our NVTIs, a lot of the OICs to ensure that they were second cycle standard and they could provide high quality skills-based training as well to our students. And one of the things we also did was actually look at the curriculum that was being used, and now we have competency-based curriculum. Students are actually training to a particular competence. So for free SHS, those were some of the things. Then the final thing I can talk about, especially around access, is the issue of double track. It has become a lot of noise.
A lot of issues.
I am proud to say that I am the chief technical officer that designed the double track.
For double track?
Yes.
Good.
So when it comes to double track, I am always excited to discuss it. And
what was the brain behind it, Doc?
Well, the idea behind, the thinking behind double track was that, or what actually necessitated double track, was that in 2017 when free SHS was introduced, and all of a sudden it became a reality. All of a sudden students realized, hey, if I pass the BEC, I can actually
get secondary school.
So there was definitely that excitement that more and more people wanted to go to school.
Even among parents.
Amongst parents. Then the second thing was that His Excellency the President also made a decision at the time that people are going all the way to Form 3 but are not sitting for the BEC because of registration fee. So the government absorbed registration fee. And we saw an 11.5% increase in registrations. And so when we saw that increase, we did some analysis and said, okay, we have about 280 or so Form 3s who are leaving the schools. Based on the 521,000 people who had registered in 2018, if we do our analysis and we say that we're going to go to school in that same fashion of first term, second term, third term, some 181,993 students were not going to be able to have access. So we looked at it and said, listen, with that same infrastructure that we have, what innovative things can we do with the adjustment of the calendar, increase in contact hours, to make sure that we can allow more children or more students to be able to have access to school? So we did a number of things. Number one, we shifted from a 3-term system to a semester system.
Okay.
A semester is usually 4 months, and then you take a break, and then another 4 months. Now, when we shifted to a semester system, then we realized that in the schools that there were high demand, instead of the students going 4 months in a row, we could take some groups of students and put them in school in 2-month blocks. So they go to school for 2 months, then they break, go to school for 2 months, then the final 2 months, the school would have cleared, and the final 4 months, then they'll go with their colleagues. So at the end of a 12-month cycle, every student will have their 8 months of education, they'll have their 4 months of break, but it needed some readjustment. The best way for your viewers to understand is this. We're here in Accra. You have a trotro that is moving from Medina to Tema Station. That trotro takes, say, 20 passengers. So we load the trotro with the 20 passengers. It moves from Medina. When it gets to Oponglo, 5 passengers get off. Those 5 passengers have used their seat. The mate will definitely pick 5 more passengers. To replace them. Then we will move all the way to Spanner. Another 5 will get off. The mate will take 5 passengers and put in there. Then you come all the way, let's say, to Opebia. Another 5 gets off. The mate brings 5 more. And then there maybe nobody gets off again and you get to Tema Station. That trotro of 20 seats have now served 35 passengers. That is the same thinking behind double track. Instead of the schools sitting idle, the classrooms sitting idle, the dormitories sitting idle when we break, use that opportunity to educate more children. So that is really the sin that we committed.
Okay.
It's the sin that we committed, is that we used an innovation to allow more children to go to school.
But then, Doc, it was going to put pressure on the teaching staff then.
We hired teachers. See, what people don't understand is that in 2018, we did the analysis and we realized that to bring in this 181,993, we needed some 8,872 new teachers, and we hired them. We did an analysis school by school, subject by subject. And I remember, I think at that time, your sister station came to the workshop we were doing at Best Western in Nungwa. Yeah. And we sat with those 400 schools at the time, school by school, did an analysis. If we give you 300 more students, how many teachers would you need? And when we did the analysis, we realized that it was 8,872. Now go check. In 2018, we got financial clearance from the Ministry of Finance to hire that 8,872 teachers. We also then did an analysis for non-teaching staff, and we hired additional non-teaching staff. So all we did was said, okay, with the existing infrastructure, even if we had the money, we couldn't build fast enough by that September. So let's use this innovation and let's promise Ghanaians that within 5 to 7 years, we would have the necessary infrastructure in place to go back to what we have.
And is infrastructure in there?
The infrastructure is here. So we promised 5 to 7 years. That 7 years ends at the beginning of the 2025-2026 academic year. So if we didn't have the infrastructure in place, the opposition couldn't even promise that they will end the double track. They know they can end, the double track will end because they know we have done what we said.
But how do you react to those? Yes, exactly the same point. John Mahama, NDC flag bearer, has said that he and his party are going to abolish double track. Immediately they assume the reins of power. I don't know if they will come into office, but if they are to come into office, and they abolish double track in January, it's not going to be possible. It is a clear, it really kind of exposes the fact that they don't understand the double track. So if they want to understand the double track, they should call me. And how's it going to affect? It's going to affect disrupt the entire academic
year? It will disrupt the entire academic calendar. Listen, double track as we even know it means that you take a group of students, the Form 1s, and you divide them into two. That system where Form 1s had gold and green, we stopped that in 2021 because we had enough infrastructure up to that point to even stop splitting students. So in the first place, they don't understand what double track is. Okay. What we are doing now is that in a number of schools, way less than the 400 schools that we started in, we are doing what is called a transitional calendar. No longer are we splitting students. No longer are we taking one group as gold and green. But what we are doing is that the school has enough infrastructure now, but because we are still working on additional infrastructure in those schools, we are running what is called a transitional calendar. In the transitional calendar, Form 1s and Form 2s are in school, Form 3 is on break. Form 2s and Form 3s are in school, Form 1 is on break, until the additional interventions that we are doing is completed. That intervention is scheduled to be completed sometime at the end of 2025. So if you take up office and you say you are immediately ending double track, then what you are saying is that on average you are asking 181,993 children to immediately go home and you are not going to educate them anymore.
Then we are going back to 2016 then.
Exactly. And that is even per cohort. So multiply that by 3. So what President Mahama is trying to say is that if you take that 180,000 even times 3, you are looking at about 540,000. What President Mahama is saying is that this 1.48 million students, they should about the 0.48 about the 500,000 should go home, and then we would have about 900,000. So what President Mahama is trying to say is that the children that are in school, about 540,000 of them, he wants to find a way to get rid of them out of the schools when he says he's going to immediately eliminate.
So that's the implication of the promise.
That's the implication. But what we are saying is that the infrastructure interventions, we have shown that we are putting those infrastructure interventions in place. Classrooms, dormitories, assembly halls, all the other ancillary infrastructure, we are putting them in place. We have, over time, strategically employed more teachers to support the 1.48 million people. That infrastructure, just like we promised, is a 5 to 7 year project. We are almost there. But you cannot come and say that you are just going to end it.
Dr. Bawumia, President Kufuor has said that the best person to safeguard free SHS is Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. The program has challenges. What is Dr. Bawumia's plan for free SHS in respect of these challenges, and how he's going to address it if he's given an opportunity to be president?
Thank you. So Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, his first key thing is that he says free SHS, he and his president gave birth to it. So someone who gave birth to their child, the child that when they were pregnant with, you told them it was a 419 pregnancy. He was trying to just use it to collect something from people. And now he has given birth to that child. When he gave birth to that child, you even say the pikin no good. The pikin doesn't look good. He has taken care of that pikin. He has completed primary. He is gaining awards, international awards, the WAEC awards and everything. Now the child is going into secondary education and is getting ready to come out of secondary education. And all of a sudden, you are telling the man who gave birth to his child that the child cries, not his, you gave birth to that child. So what Dr. Bawumia is trying to say is that I gave birth to that child, I can protect my child. I gave birth to that child, I know what my child needs. And because he knows what his child needs, he has also put on the table what he is going to do to support that child. We all understand that free SHS is a human intervention. You know, everything that we are doing is human interventions. And in human endeavors, there are challenges. There are two key challenges that everybody screams about. Challenge number one is the issue of feeding. Challenge number two is infrastructure. I think my conversation has already talked about the systematic process to get the infrastructure in place. But what Dr. Bawumia is trying to say is that to even complete that infrastructure faster, the first thing he's going to do is that he's going to invite private sector to come in and to take up the building of school infrastructure so that it can free up, get funds, locked up resources.
So it will no longer be a burden for government.
No.
The private sector will be involved this time around.
Exactly. So for example, every year, Get Fund spends a little over 1.5, 1.8 billion cedis in locked up resources for infrastructure contracts.
Wow.
So if you invite the private sector in, all of a sudden that 1.8 billion is freed up. If that 1.8 billion is freed up, you can use it to fix your feeding challenges.
But this private sector will not build this for free.
They are not going, and Dr. Bawumia is not saying that they should build it for free. As a matter of fact, he's using that to create more jobs. Because if you give contracts to the private sector is going to, or you tell them they should build, they will hire people to do the building. They would hire masons, electricians, and all those things. Now, once they build, Dr. Bawumia is saying that the building is still yours. But it is sitting on government land. So it is a BOT or BOMT, build, operate, maintain, and then eventually transfer to government. And what government is going to say is that, okay, let's just say for the next 15 years, next 20 years, the building is still yours. How much would we lease the building for? So if you spend, say, $10 million or 10 million cedis to put up a dormitory structure, the government says, okay, over the next 15 years, I'll pay you, say, 1 million cedis or 1.5 million cedis. The government has even saved at the front end 8.5 million cedis that they would have used to build that building. But then the government will pay over a 15-year period. You would recoup your investment. You would also recoup your interest. Then you would have also been able to use some of it for maintenance, which creates more job. And then after the 15 or 20 years, the government has paid you off. Government can take that infrastructure. He has created jobs in that 15 years lifespan. He has then also been able to free up locked up resources.
So within that period of, let's say, 10 years, maintenance, everything will be in the private sector.
Yes.
In the private hand.
Exactly.
And after payment, it comes back to government.
Back to government. See, these are the bold solutions that he's thinking about for the future. And so what he has said is that the free SHS that I brought, these are the things I'm going to do to address it. Then even on the score of feeding, Dr. Bawumia is saying that.
Doc, hold on with the feeding. It's a very topical issue. We'll go for a break. When we come back, we'll dwell heavily on feeding, which has come up a number of times in our media discussion. You're still watching the Manifesto, coming to you live from our studio here in Accra. My guest is Dr. Kwabena Tandoh. He's the Deputy Director of the Ghana Education Service and a member of the Dr. Bawumia Manifesto Committee on Education, I guess. We'll go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. You're welcome back. You're still watching the Manifesto, coming to you live from our studio here in Accra. Manifesto, we look at the promises of the various political parties as we prepare for the December election. Today, we are doing the NPP and their promise in the education sector. Dr. Tandoh is my guest. He's the Deputy Director General of the Ghana Education Service and a member of the Education Manifesto Committee of the Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia campaign team. Before we went on the break, we were talking about free SHS and the challenges that has come with and the bold solutions Dr. Bawumia is proposing to address these challenges within the education sector, especially the free SHS policy. Doc, before we went on break, an issue that has come up for discussion is feeding within the various senior high schools as far as the free SHS is concerned. What is Dr. Bawumia's proposal in ending how I'll describe is the annual academic year ritual of feeding anytime it comes up?
I think it's also important to that is that it's more of a recent time issue, because when we first started free SHS, we all know that there was even a point that some people were complaining.
People forget it never happened. People remember it many times.
People are complaining that the children are eating too much. But there are some key things Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is proposing in addressing this. The first one is what I discussed. Innovative and strategic ways of infrastructure development, freeing up resources to support the areas that you need, including feeding. But what he's also saying is that in our senior high schools, the senior high schools have large tracts of lands. And we used to have very, very effective school farms.
When I was in secondary school, we had a school farm.
Yes.
On Fridays, we go on there to go and work.
Exactly. Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is saying that he wants to revive school farms in partnership with even the private sector, in partnership with some of our development partners like the World Food Program, to look at areas that we can look at, not just even planting foods, but we are looking at animal husbandry, poultry, aquaculture, and things like that, using the already existing lands and spaces that the schools have. So you look at a number of them and then you build school farms on those. Now, those school farms will not necessarily be able to feed all of the children across the country. But all of a sudden, you have created an additional opportunity for producing what you need to augment what you would use resources to buy. So if, let's say, across the country, all of a sudden, out of our 7,000 second cycle institutions, even 100 of them is running say a 20,000 bed poultry facility. All of a sudden, you have close to 2 million beds scattered across the country. And even if on a daily basis, each of the beds is laying one, or 2 beds are laying 1 egg, then you are looking at about 1 million eggs.
Enough to feed.
Then, at that same way, you have some large school farms that are planting grain. But it's not just the students that are working on the farms. You would also create community employment, because the farms will be in partnership with private sector. So you create community employment. You are using the arable lands that we have, the large tracts of land that we have. You have schools that are now doing aquaculture, raising tilapia. You have schools that are doing animal husbandry. Then all of a sudden, you have enough even within the schools to support not just the free SHS, but also school feeding at the basic level. Because those local schools can then support the basic schools. Let me give you a perfect example of it. We have a school in Northern Region. It's actually a technical and vocational school. It's called Dabopa. Dabopa Technical Institute, they have a bread or bakery. Their bakery is able to support about 10 senior high schools every morning.
The school owns the bakery?
The school owns the bakery. Then what they do is they bake bread to support about 10 senior high schools within their vicinity with bread in the mornings. So what we are doing is that not only are we, what Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is saying is that we are training the students, grammar education, technical education, vocational education, and all those things. But we can then also revive some of these things that we used to have to support in the implementation of the free SHS. These are the bold solutions that he's thinking about in terms of how do we address these 2 key challenges that has always been coming up when the discussion around free SHS happens.
Interesting. Another issue within the same free SHS policy, which many people have said that even though the kids, in quotes, are still going to school. There are some schools which still charge, extra fee in certain areas. I'm sure the bold solutions will address all these ones.
Well, the key thing here to understand is that the policy of the free SHS is that there is no cost implication to the parent and to the student.
But we hear news of these charges all the time.
They are not the policies of government, but rather the implementation on the ground.
But it is blame on government.
which usually is how these things happen.
Yeah.
One of the things that we are going to do to try to mitigate some of these things, if you go back and look at the manifesto, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is talking about revamped school governance and school leadership.
Okay.
Because we know at the end of the day, it's a matter of leadership at the school level, governance at the school level. Now, all of our schools, second cycle schools, all have school boards. The school boards support the head and the leadership of the school in terms of their day-to-day running of the school, because you have a director general who is sitting in Accra. Then you have a Half-Mine Senior High School in my hometown of Goso. Director general is not there. So Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is saying that some of these challenges that then we hear on media, can be attributed to issues around leadership and management at the school level, as well as governance. And he has proposed, how do we support in developing the school governance system so that it is more robust, it actually supports the heads more? How are we developing the heads so that they understand what their leadership impact on the school is, so that they are able to make certain decisions that support? Listen, if a school needs additional support, which all schools need additional support, right? Government has not said that no support should come from anybody else. We know, where you and I went to school, that every school has old student associations. Yeah. Old boys, old girls, and old students associations. Old student associations, as well as parent-teacher organizations or associations in our schools, are probably the largest supporters of schools after government. And government has in no way said that those supports should end. All government says is that whatever support is happening for the school should not be tied to a student. So, for example, my old school, Prempeh College, my year group, 1996 SSS year group, we just handed over a 5 two-bedroom apartment to Prempeh College for non-teaching staff, just this past Saturday. Now, when my year group decided that this is a project we wanted to do for our 25th anniversary, we did not go to the headmaster of the school and ask, what are the number of students in the school? Let us levy student by student based on the project cost. We came amongst ourselves and we all supported. My mate that everybody thinks didn't go to Prempeh College, Woon to me, came. He actually launched the project. He provided some support. All of us chipped in. 20,000 here, 10,000 here, 2,000 here, 1,000 here, and we're able to build. All we are saying is that school leadership must look at innovative ways for additional things that they want to do in the school, rather than levy the students. So we are discouraging, and we are saying that it is actually as part of our policy. Students should not be levied. That same way, PTAs, the biggest challenge we have with PTAs is that when they want to do something for the school, that thing costs 10,000 cedis. You have 1,000 students in the school. Then PTA will say, then every student's parent should pay 100 cedis. What about that parent who sincerely cannot afford that 100 cedis? Then it becomes a burden. So all we are saying is that PTAs that are one of our greatest supports, what they should do is say, okay, the project we want to do is 10,000 cedis. Parents, what can you bring? All that could happen. One parent could get up and say that, I have the 10,000 cedis, so stop worrying everybody. Yeah. Let's do it. Then what we are also saying is that don't use the staff in the school as the conduit to collect and then worry the children. But apart from that, what we are saying is that innovative ways can be used to support school development and ensuring that the schools are doing well.
Look, free SHS has come to stay. No two ways about that. Your main opponent, John Mahama, said there's no way he's going to abolish free SHS. He brought it. He introduced it. So there was no way he was going to abolish it, but then it has come to stay. Another area that has come up for discussion within the free SHS policy is STEM education. Your flag bearer, he's known to be a man of digitalization. People call him Bawumia digitalization. STEM education is something on his heart's priority. I've heard him make comments on a number of things. What is his area when it comes to development of STEM education in Ghana here?
Well, as a matter of fact, he wants to deepen free SHS by focusing on STEM and TVET.
Definitely.
Now, STEM, that we've all been hearing, it's really science, technology, engineering, and mathematics as a base for learning, because we believe that just about everything you want to do has that base in science, in mathematics, in technology, and in engineering, you know, in terms of design thinking and all those things. And what Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is saying is that in focusing on secondary education, he wants to ensure that we have a key focus on STEM. Something that we started long ago. We started during the President Kufuor time with STEMI and so on, and then it has progressively gotten to where we are, where what we did is that we took our model schools. When the government came in, it built a number of model schools. Abomosu, Pesempe, Awaso, we built Akrodi, we built about 9 or 10 model schools. And what the government decided to do is to take these model schools and make them STEM-focused second cycle institutions.
Okay.
Abomosu, of course, being one of the flagship ones that is close to here. But not only that, the government also built what we call STEM or STEAM centers. In Greater Accra, our STEAM center is Accra High School.
Okay.
When you go to Accra High School, we have a state-of-the-art center where in Ghana now, children at the basic and senior high school level are now doing 3D printing.
Oh, wow.
You can go to Greater Accra and you see 3D printing. There is robotics. You know, so the robotics that students were going for international competition, we are now making it more common for students to learn the robotics building and then also programming those robots to perform certain tasks. So what Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is saying is that it is going to become a part and parcel of the secondary education curriculum, where STEM is going to be featured in a lot more strongly. You know, it is part of his whole thinking around digitalization, ensuring that more youth are skilled in technology and everything else. So that is where his drive is. And Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia even believes that you can teach digital skills to people who necessarily did not even complete school, you know, and so he is interested in this 1 million digital skills. He's looking at both graduates as well as non-graduates who have the ability and the competencies to learn digital skills so that they can be able to use that. So yes.
The more reason why he's promising 1 million, for those who do coding and the rest.
Exactly. Definitely. So those are critical things.
So let's talk about basic education. The accusation is that because of free SHS, there's neglect when it comes to basic education. From where you sit, you have a better understanding of basic education. What would be Dr. Bawumia's focus on basic education? But not because the concern is on free SHS, then he also has time for basic education. What is the plan?
Well, thank you. So in terms of basic education, number one, that accusation, it's again, we have to understand it within a particular context. Because right now, the government is implementing the single largest investment.
But they say the concentration is all on free SHS.
Because that's what we talk about a lot.
Well.
Right? So because right now we are implementing a 5-year, $218.5 million investment in accountability, learning outcomes, and everything at the basic education under the GALOP, the Ghana Accountability for Learning Outcomes Project. Now, for Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, what he's saying in basic education, a number of ways. Number one, he's saying that he's going to continue to improve the infrastructure that we have in basic schools, KG, and all the areas where we need to uplift and improve those infrastructure. That's going to continue to be his focus. Number two, he's going to look at what is called play-based learning. And then he's going to ensure that we use play-based learning and scale it up across the country as a foundation to ensure that children are really learning critical skills, analytical skills, and the likes. Number three, he wants to incentivize teachers at the basic education level, because one of the things we realize is that when people complete colleges of education, they are focusing more into junior high school and into upper primary. So he wants to incentivize them. One of the key incentives is that usually in the Ghana Education Service, when you are employed, you have to serve about 4 or 5 years before your first promotion. He wants to incentivize by saying, if you go into basic and foundational learning, 3 years, you do your first promotion. So you will be promoted out of 10 because you focus there. He wants to look at steady leave with pay, focusing on teachers who are looking at foundational learning, teachers who are going to deprived areas and the stuff. Then number 3, what he's saying is that if you still look at our schools, a number of persons with disabilities are not in our schools. Parents don't have confidence in our school system, and for that matter, persons with disabilities are missing in our schools. He wants to initially hire 1,000 persons with teachers that support special needs students, and then also provide training to the existing teachers on identifying disability issues in our schools so that they can be able to better support those children, bringing in the 1,000 persons, teachers that are trained in terms of persons with disabilities. So those are some of the key things that he wants to do in terms of basic and foundational learning to make sure that we have a stronger foundation to build.
His promise of persons with disability.
Yes.
What is this policy?
Okay, so Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, we have in our education policy, we have 5 pillars, but then he has a clear focus on persons with disability. Actually, if you look at the full manifesto, it's 7.5.2, where he looks at special education needs. Now, like I said, the first thing is he wants to improve staffing in our schools. Number 2, he wants to ensure that our special education schools, in Ghana, we have about 28 or 29 of them dotted across the country. He wants to actually modernize them, ensure that when students go into those schools, whether you are visually impaired or hearing impaired, you can navigate the physical space with little aid because of all of the modernizations that he wants us to do for those particular schools. Number 3, what he's saying is that persons with disability go through a lot more challenges when it comes to financial support for education. And so if you're a person with disability, identified as a person with disability, be it a physical, hearing impairment, visual impairment, or other forms of learning disabilities, you have completed second cycle or high school education. He wants to make sure that your university education, you are not hindered financially, and so he's going to ensure that free tertiary education for persons with disabilities. And he's going to use some of these support systems that he's proposed to make sure that when the universities even get increased numbers of persons with disabilities, they have the support structures in place to support those students. But he has a clear understanding that he wants to ensure that the persons with disability, who make up about 8% of the Ghanaian population, fully participate in the Ghanaian economy. You know, one of the things he's also proposing is what he's calling diverse ability training program. And so it is a strategy to ensure that regardless of your ability, you receive the skill sets that are necessary for you to fully participate in the economy. So he, even in addition to his education strategy, is specifically zeroing in and having a laser-sharp focus on persons.
Any incentive for teachers, because teachers play a very important role
when it comes to education. Great incentives.
What are these incentives he's promising?
Number 1, we have a project called Housing for All. And Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is saying that he wants to work with the teacher unions and other professional bodies to ensure that they can look at they can take advantage of the Housing for All project in finding accommodation, building accommodation, and securing accommodation for teachers through that program. Because one of the key things is accommodation for teachers while in service and then also
after
post-service.
service.
And so using that Housing for All, he wants to support teachers to be able to look address their accommodation challenges. Number 2, President Kufuor had an incentive for teachers as well as other public sector workers where they could either import a vehicle of a certain engine capacity into the country. It was cancelled by the former President Mahama. What President Bawumia is saying of Vice President Bawumia, anyway, I'm prophesying into the future. What he's saying is that he wants to bring that back.
Okay.
Now, he knows that when he brings it back, in the Ghana Education Service alone, we have over 350,000 teaching and non-teaching staff. So obviously, not all of them are going to import. But what that's going to do is it's going to boost the local car assembly business. You know, with tax incentives and things, you don't necessarily have to import, but you all of a sudden you are giving the local car assembly business more opportunity to produce even more because teachers as well as other public sector workers would receive some tax rebates to be able to get those vehicles. In addition to that, he's even looking at the professional growth of teachers. And he's saying that he wants to look at how do you invest more in their professional development beyond the professional development allowance that has been given to them. what other incentives can you put to ensure that the teacher can continue to grow themselves? So there are a number of things in the manifesto that he's doing in terms of focusing.
Look, we have to go, but
teachers.
just a quick one. Your main opponent, not you, I mean, your boss's main opponent, John Mahama, says that he's going to introduce free tertiary education within the first year. Is that possible for you? Is that possible?
I think that, one of the things that I have seen is that their policy statements are usually incomplete. The reason why I'm saying incomplete, I'm saying this from an education perspective. Their policy statement is clear that they are going to introduce free tertiary education
for first year
students. What are you trying to say? So after first year, the student can drop out, right? But the interesting thing is that they are saying they are going to give them access to student loans.
Yes.
Now, he is going to be able to give them access to student loans because Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has done the no guarantor system, which means the system has already been put in place for first-year students who otherwise wouldn't have had that opportunity to access student loans because they didn't have a guarantor. Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has already addressed that challenge. And so what I usually see is that the policy statements from the NDC are usually incomplete and not fully thought through.
Doc, thank you very much. Dr. Kwabena Tandoh is Deputy Director General of the Ghana Education Service and a member of the NPP Education Manifesto Committee, and he was my guest on the manifesto. My name is Sami Wiafe. So we'll come your way again next time. Be good.